Guys, my apologies. I didn't know that the VOD was live with the audio. I am terribly sorry. My apologies. I did not know. Okay. Now we have fixed it. So now we can start this proper, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only Aaron Fothergill. We are joined by here today. They couldn't hear our last 5 minutes of talking because I was playing the audio too damn loud. So I had my audio messed up. You had your audio messed up. We're doing this professionally, as I'm sure you can tell. But yeah.
Did you remember to press the record button?
Yes, I remembered to press the record button. Thank you for checking. Honestly. No faith in me at all. Anyway, how are you doing, man?
Good. I've lost my video for some reason or other. It seems to be working. I just don't actually see the call.
That's odd. Well, we can see you, and the stream can see you, and they're all saying hi to you, so we're good.
That's good. Right, cool.
Okay. Whip, I assume you have a copy of the questions to hand, right?
Correct.
Fantastic. Okay. So I should probably have a copy as well, but the thing is that I'm currently using my screen as a monitor because for some reason Skype wouldn't capture the video, so I'm having to do a display capture on Aaron here to get it to show properly on the stream. It's awkward, but we're getting it fixed. So yeah, first things first. Let's jump back to what we were saying before I fixed my audio levels. You have a Norwegian copy of the game that you had just lying around?
Yeah. I think it's Norwegian. It's packed somewhere because, as I was saying, I've literally only just moved back into my flat after it's been rebuilt just before Christmas, and I moved back in. I think a few days before Christmas, and with bits still everywhere. Lots of stuff still in boxes. You can see behind me. There's all sorts of bits and pieces behind me. It's kind of livable again, which is great, and everything's really wonderful. But I don't know where anything is. And I was looking today to see if I could find my copy of the game. I've got a PlayStation 1 copy that's still sealed, I think, because it wasn't playable on the PlayStation I had. Because well, yeah, as I was saying, when you write the games with most publishers will give you a copy of the game, but it's 50-50 whether you get a copy you can actually play or one they just happen to have from whatever stock that's a different version of it. So, for instance, I think I ended up with a Norwegian copy or something. Yeah, and I know I've got. For the previous game I got, Aladdin Nazira's Revenge, I've got 2 copies of that, one of which is English, but I think NTSC, so I couldn't play it, and also one other, I think that might have been Norwegian as well. There seemed to be quite a lot of overproduction from the Norwegian market.
That's quite odd. So maybe Argonaut was looking to bust into the Norwegian market pretty strong, because I was looking into this, and this was quite interesting. Argonaut did a bunch of PS1 games that I didn't really...
Oh, yeah. Well, they were all the same engine. This was the reason for Harry Potter. So, bit of history. I joined Argonaut at the time they were writing Croc 2.
Right.
And they'd already had a big success with Croc 1, which is, again, quite a lot of history. That was actually the basis for Mario 64 and all this kind of stuff. And we had what we called the Croc engine. And Croc 2, we had a slightly enhanced version of the Croc engine, but the main thing was we had all the tools there. Let's write a game with it and just slightly tweak it and enhance it in terms of what the engine could do. But now we all knew what we were doing with it, and I joined them then as a gameplay programmer and started experimenting with all sorts of things. Yeah. So, for instance, I designed the minecart system in Croc 2, which was the basis of the minecarts in Harry Potter.
So you're the one to blame.
Yeah, I didn't write those, and they nearly got axed. There's a story about that later. But I didn't write the ones in Harry Potter, but they were based on what I'd already done for Croc 2. And the whole engine for Harry Potter was the Croc 2 engine, because essentially we'd been using that engine for a while. EA had got the rights to Harry Potter, but couldn't write it in time themselves because it absolutely had to come out with the film in 9 months' time. And basically, we were the only people who could possibly write it in that time, because we had an engine that we knew how it worked, and we could write this kind of game very quickly and very well, given, well, fortunately with Harry Potter, of course, you've got a given plot. So it was a lot easier to sit down and actually say, well, how are we going to do this?
So is that how you and Argonaut got the deal? Because you were the only team in town that could actually pull it off, given the deadline.
Yeah, I just finished doing Aladdin: Nazira's Revenge. I was on the team doing that, and Jamie Walker, who was the producer for Harry Potter, he'd actually his team had basically, it was a new team effectively. He'd started up a team and put together to do The Emperor's New Groove, which was also using the Croc engine, and we were sharing an office space, so we had the two teams on one floor, with them as a brand new team, learning off us, who were people pulled in from all sorts of other ones, while the Croc 2 team went off to do, actually they'd started doing PlayStation 2 stuff because they were the experienced team. So Aladdin: Nazira's Revenge was a nightmare project, but took 18 months, was hellish, it was, lots of horrible things, but it got done. And Emperor's New Groove went really well. They had a nice fresh team and decent production and stuff, and it all got together. And then Jamie was involved in getting the deal sorted with the heads Argonaut, and obviously with EA there have been discussions, and then they said, we need to put a crack team together of whoever's best at everything. Pulled us all in from different teams, so I ended up being pulled in because I was the go-to guy for how what we call the strat code, Argonaut's strategy language as it was, how all the gameplay coding was done. So I've been teaching their guys how that worked, as well as developing what I could do with it myself. And so I wasn't lead coder, I was kind of lead strategy coder, and my team had the lead designer. So we all went in these sort of sub-teams and so on. So it's a very strange structure, but it worked. It's all these little mini teams doing different pieces of the game. So everything was massively parallel for the production.
Well, that's fantastic, because what you've got into there is several questions that I haven't got around to even asking yet, that you've sort of given us answers to. So literally one of the questions we've got here is, what sort of deadline did you guys have? And you've just said 9 months. So...
Yeah, and it was absolute. Oh, and they were ripping down the sets for the film at the time we first started. So the artists had to be bussed off to the film sets at Warner Brothers to actually, they couldn't take photos. No one was allowed to take photos because it was all top secret. We weren't even allowed to say what we were working on.
Oh my goodness.
Because it was supposed to be EA's project. So what happened was our artists essentially all got bussed off to have a look at the film sets and draw as much as they could, which went to an office at EA. And was all put up on the walls in an office at EA that we could go and visit, but we weren't allowed to take photos or anything back with us. So basically our artists would be going backwards and forth and taking notes, and they had to do it fast because they were ripping the set down because they had another film to do.
Yeah, goodness. So definitely a very sort of stressful sort of process of getting all the art assets and all that, I imagine. That was,
yeah. It also leads on to why the PC version has my original boss battle at the end. It's because the PC version overran quite massively, so they basically asked if they could just use all our stuff.
Yeah, because
so a lot of their game design was actually taken from the PlayStation 1 version, including my original Voldemort boss battle, which didn't actually make it into the final cut of the PlayStation 1 version. So Jamie came in with an idea he liked for that, so we ended up with 2 different boss battles.
Yeah. So when did work actually start on Harry Potter PS1? Like, do you remember what month, or do you remember?
No, I was still I was still mentally in a daze from getting over finishing Aladdin, and I'd accrued I think 8 weeks of holiday running over. I could literally have done a 4-day week for a year on the basis of the amount of holiday I had stacked up, because that would. So much crunch. We'd had to work through Easter, we'd had to work through most of Christmas, we didn't have any weekends off. It was very, very bad crunch. And that was in the days when that kind of stuff, happened. You didn't get paid anything extra, you just had to do it, or everyone would be out of a job kind of thing. So, we got through that. And I'm not quite sure even what year or country I was in, I think, by the end of that one. So, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So, one thing that I wanted to ask is that because, we've got many speedrunners in the community, I personally did a tool-assisted speedrun of the game. And one thing that we've done is we've sort of gone through the original sort of code and we found a lot of interesting like developer notes that were left in there, and like unused assets and all the rest of it. So one part of code that was left over was actually like a file structure, like a folder directory, and at some point it mentioned like all the art assets were like in a folder. So I'm curious, did EA give you those assets, or did you have to make them yourself?
No, we did all the assets ourselves. It was part of the speed. It's like basically a development speed run.
Right.
So essentially, each mini team would be a coder and a designer who would be focused entirely on getting that particular task done. And we'd have usually an animator and a 3D artist, a 3D modeler, and working with us, or a texture modeler working with us, and we'd be pretty much permanently stuck together for the entire project. Mm-hmm. So we could say, for instance, like I wrote Fluffy for it, the Fluffy section where you're playing the flute to Fluffy to make him go to sleep. Mm-hmm. And we would say, right, here's how it's going to work. The designer would work out how the actual gameplay would work. I'd work out how it's going to work code-wise. We need these assets, and our attached artists would actually then get that sorted out, and we very rapidly sort of put it all together. And it was everyone being literally sat in around a couple of desks made it that much faster, because we didn't have to wait on someone from EA sending us something and so on. EA had to approve it, and hanging over our heads the entire project was the story that we'd heard when we first started, that J.K. Rowling had absolute veto because it was her baby, and that just before we started, she'd been to a company that had made £200,000 worth of merchandise for Harry Potter merchandise. She decided it wasn't quite good enough, so they had to bin the entire lot.
Oh my goodness.
So the entire project we're going through, we're thinking, well, we could get to the end of this thing, get it done, what we think is perfect, and she doesn't like it, bang, it's gone.
Wow. My goodness. So not only were you stressed, not only was it rushed, not only did you have a really tight deadline, but you also had J.K. Rowling looming over the top of it.
Yeah.
All stacked.
And we also had about a third of the way through, the CEO of the company was showing off, basically I think he was talking to some investors or somebody or other, bringing him around, showing what was going on, and blabbed about Harry Potter and the fact we were working on it, which we weren't supposed to do, and nearly got the entire project canned.
Oh, fantastic. Oh,
so fortunately he managed to talk his way out of that one.
Yeah, luckily, because if not, we would have never had the game. So one thing that I'm kind of curious about, like I said, from going through the code, is quite a lot of the comments, like the language that the game was coded in was in C. So I've got a hunch that it was in C. Am I right? No, it's not in C.
Yes, no, the engine was in C.
Right.
So basically the basic Croc engine was written in C, but most of the actual gameplay code was written in what we called ASL, the Argonaut strategy language.
Right.
And that was essentially a scripting language that allowed you to prototype without actually compiling. So basically, we could actually run it without compiling levels, which means that we could actually run it on the dev kits without building the entire game. So we could literally just run a level quickly, which again gave us very, very rapid turnaround.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yeah. So one of the questions here is, of course, about that Argonaut strategy language. What do you remember about it? Like, do you remember how it worked? Do you remember like the nitty gritty?
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially. See, I'd come from a background of writing quite a lot of games in BASIC, so I had a fair bit of C knowledge by that point. But most of the actual games I'd written before then, I'd actually written in things like Amos and STOS. Because I used to run the Amos Club and the STOS Club before then, and I helped develop Amos. I've done a lot of stuff with this sort of background in high-level languages like that. And when I ended up at Argonaut, they said, oh, well, have you have a look at this? So I got to playing with ASL, and it's great. And it was a very, very quick and flexible language, very easy to prototype something, very easy to get something up and running. It was 3D based, so everything went together really well. Generally speaking, the engine coders wouldn't let us tweak the engine. So I got to tweak it a little bit for the particle system on Croc 2. They allowed me to mess around with it to do a few more things on the particle system. But generally speaking, I wasn't allowed to touch that. So we had to work within what ASL could do. And ASL was tied very well together with what we called the Croc Editor, which was basically a 3D editor that worked off blocks to very quickly put together levels. And you could tie in that with your strats to actually build things together very quickly. And it was object oriented, but the problem was, and this was a major problem, it didn't have arrays at all. So where we get any scenario where you normally want an array to do something, you're kind of stuffed. And what you had to do is actually have multiple dummy objects floating around to pretend to be an array. And that went all the way through, even on I think on Catwoman, which was at the end of Argonaut in 2004. We still didn't have arrays in ASL because the engine guys didn't want to add it in.
Wow.
Or rather, management of the engine. It was sort of a long, convoluted, political kind of thing by that point, you know. And there was a lot of talk, we'll do ASL too, and they never did. You know, it was just...
So that's actually led into another question that we've got, and that's like, what kind of developer tools did you have while you were working on the game?
Yeah, that was there's a weird one. There's a video somewhere at EA. They did a making of video. It was me sat in front of my clunky PC with my. It was actually, I think I had an iBook at the time I was using. Yeah, it was my iBook on my desk, because I was actually using the official tools were a PC running the PlayStation dev kit, the PlayStation 1 dev kit, and an actual dev kit, you know, sort of to the side, which most of us had. Rather, a lot of us had hacked consumer units rather than actual dev kits that kind of got hidden every time Sony came around, because that was a lot cheaper than dev kits. And for the game designers and testers, that's all they needed. They didn't actually need the full dev kit because they didn't need to debug. We had the full debug kits. So it'd be work on a PC, dump it to the dev kit and run on there. I actually did everything on my iBook using Code Warrior, which was then synced to the PC. So my code would be actually entered on the iBook, would automatically synchronize with the PC, build on the PC to the PlayStation, because that was quicker for me.
Mm-hmm. And did you actually use the Croc Editor for HP1, or was that a separate thing?
Yeah, no, the Croc Editor was all the way through all of the ASL games. So it got little tweaks every now and again, and we all used the Croc Editor, because if you're working as a programmer, you're putting test levels together. So there's probably a few of those floating around, still in the data of the various test levels and so on. And then, you know, we'd have these little prototype rooms where we're trying things out, which wouldn't be in the main level structure, obviously, but would still be floating around in all the data.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because there is actually one test level that made it to the final game where it's all of the sort of house rewards that you get. You know how you get like the Nimbus 2000 and you get the Flipper Duo and all the rest of it. It's a test room that isn't finished, but it's got doors that lead to each of the rewards that you get. And I was thinking that must be a development leftover. So you'll say it probably is. Yeah. There's a few other levels in screenshots and all the rest of it where, like, it's either a level that made it into the final game but it's got a different skybox, or it's a level we haven't ever seen before, or just a bunch of stuff like that. So you'll say there's actually quite a lot of these levels that never made the final cut. Yeah. Well,
there's a lot of features as well. One of the other coders, Tom Commode, it was a very, very nice little Easter egg. There was a kitten in the game that would be around the halls, and one of the things for the kitten was about once every 1,000 times or something you played the game, you would sit down and have a wee on the floor, as kittens do. You know,
how have we never found that?
Because EA were ridiculously strict in their no Easter eggs policy, and it got cut.
Oh, that's such a shame.
Yeah, the zombie chickens that got cut from the American version of Aladdin and Zero's Revenge actually were in the prototypes, but they got cut as well. So yeah,
that's incredible. I didn't know that.
There's a lot of stuff like that the one Easter egg that did get in was an official one, which is all the wizard paintings you see around Hogwarts.
Yes,
they're all the developers.
Yeah.
So basically, we all had our mugshots taken and turned into wizards and plastered all around Hogwarts.
Yeah.
I think I'm in a tower somewhere. I'm not quite sure.
I was going to ask you in a later question, do you remember which photo was yours? But, you know, I'm guessing you don't.
No, it probably looked something like this now, but with a wizard's hat on.
Okay, fair enough.
But from what I remember, I'm in one of the towers somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, from when I played it through once. Yeah.
Yeah. So, one question that I had as a kid, and I still have to this day, why did Harry Potter never have a jump button?
Because this is a very early design decision. With all the previous games we'd done, and with the controllers, we found some interesting stuff about how kids play the games and so on. And also with things like the camera controls were always very tricky on most of the games. So the designers made a very early decision that it would be auto jump.
Right.
That way we just keep the system simple, so it's more about navigation and exploration than precision timing to jump.
Mm-hmm. So, and that was made early on in the development.
Yeah, because when Ben was doing the basically he was doing the main character control, we had a bit of a thing, and it was made as an executive decision. Yeah, we're going with no jump control. It would be an absolute auto jump.
Mm-hmm. So, how did that system work exactly? Do you remember like how it decided when the players should jump and when they shouldn't, or like any details about that, or is it so long ago you don't remember?
It's a long time ago, but from what I remember and the way ASL worked, you had very, very primitive collision detection. All we had was essentially raycasts downwards, and they were very expensive, so you had to be careful how you use them. So the probability is all it was doing was checking in front of you to see if there was an edge, and if it dropped off by a certain amount, there's a possible jump there, and then it was looking to see if you could jump to something. And if you could jump to something directly in front of you, it jumped.
Right, that makes sense.
Otherwise it kept you off the edge. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
That works well together with what Red Hat figured out when he was finding test codes.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that I noticed when I'm looking through the code of the game is there's a lot of mention of a sort of waypoint system. And do you remember how that worked at all? Do you remember like
Yeah, I mean, we had it was the nearest thing we had to arrays was waypoints, and it was just basically a case of you could place a waypoint as part of the. If I remember, you could place a waypoint as part of the Croc Editor and attach it to objects, so an object could have a string of waypoints. Mm-hmm. So basically, it's just literally XYZ coordinates that you could navigate to, because you had all the kind of turn to kind of code in ASL, which was quite handy.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. So this is more of a level design question, and I don't know if you were involved in the level design team or what have you. But what was the Broom cupboard going to be used for? Because in the final game, there's a room called the Broom cupboard, and you can never access it, no matter what you do, and it's right in the main hall, like the first room of the game that you spawn into. And people have been wondering for ages, what's the point of the Broom cupboard? Why is it there? And so far we've got no answers. So
I don't know, because the problem is, you see, a lot of the stuff we did, I'd have to ask Steve Jarrett on that, because he was the lead designer. He was the guy I was partnered up with to work on with, and a lot of the stuff we came up with that was fun for gameplay was no, you can't do that because it's not in the first book. And of course, we read the first 2, I think maybe 3 books by the time we started. So we had a lot of extra reference material. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, we're going to have spiders as one of the baddies in the level, because spiders are always quite handy monsters to use in games.
The code.
Yeah, but they're not in the first book. They're only in the second book, so they were vetoed. So we couldn't use them.
Yeah, and that's why the skulls were removed, because I remember there was the figure with the 4 eyes puzzle in the dungeon. Originally, that was like flaming skulls or something, and so I'm guessing that got cut because of not being in the book as well. Yeah,
the only bit we were allowed to do that wasn't in the book was the sleepwalking troll, which is one our team did, and we had the problem that the end sequence of all the different puzzles leading up to the combat with Voldemort at the end. We realised we were running it a bit short. The game just wasn't long enough, and we needed another puzzle in there. Now, in the book, they come across a troll that's already asleep because Voldemort's gone through, knocked it out as part of that trial already. So they just walk past it in the book. It's just mentioned, and that's kind of it. We said, well, can we have the troll kind of waking up from this and you've got to get away down the corridor quietly so as not to wake it up fully. So it's sleepwalking after you. Rather than, so it's partly knocked out, but if you make any noise by knocking over the suits of armor or halberds or whatever along the way, it will wake up and clobber you. So we had to get that specially approved by EA and J.K. Rowling to be allowed to do it, because it was a change in the story from the book.
Right, I see. And that was the only change from the book that you were allowed?
Yeah, that was the only one we were allowed.
Huh. So the opening part, where the opening sort of quarter of the book where Harry's living with the Dursleys and Diagon Alley, that was all covered in a storybook near the start of the game. Did you guys at Argonaut just decide that wouldn't make for good gameplay, or...?
I think, that was, from what I remember, that was a design decision that, look, we there's not much to do with this. I think we'd actually mocked up some ideas for Diagon Alley, but essentially it's pre-story for a game, so, there's no real gameplay going on there.
Mm-hmm. So you just decided skip that.
That's it. Yeah, that story into the actual game. Yeah. Plus, also, it's very different set designs to what we were doing for. With that amount of time we had, you can only do so many locations. So doing Hogwarts and all the stuff around Hogwarts was going to be pretty heavy anyway.
Yeah. So one thing that I noticed, again from going through the code, is that the Quidditch League that was added. You have the code of the game goes through, and then it stops like there's nothing more. And then right at the end, like stitched on was the Quidditch League. Was that like a last minute addition? Was that like something you'd added on at the end? Because it looks like it.
Well, the thing with Quidditch was we'd read Quidditch, and we'd sat down and had quite a few gameplay design meetings about Quidditch, and we came to realise very, very quickly that Quidditch is well written for storylines. It's very good for making up stories and stuff around Quidditch, but it's absolutely hopeless as a game. It's not a sport. It's not a playable game. It's just like there's no logic to it at all that makes it any way fun as a game. So the only thing we could do really was just do it as a scripted, tap now kind of sequence. To play it through, so it's more like the story would be in the book, which makes it exciting and fun, and broomstick flying and so on. Yeah. But the actual sport part of it is like, no, we're not going to be doing EA Quidditch 2019 anytime soon.
Oh, that's great.
But this does ask the question, because the Quidditch League itself was that actually an afterthought, or was that a request by EA?
I don't know on that one. It's likely to have been a request by EA to have something to do it, but the actual gameplay of Quidditch wasn't there, so anything like that would purely be, some sort of, sparkliness at the end kind of thing.
So that's the interesting thing about Quidditch, because I can tell that the game was rushed, because we actually used the Quidditch League for one of the major skips in the game, because there's basically a scene outside the Quidditch pitch where Hagrid spawns and takes you to Diagon Alley. And the only check that he does as to whether he should spawn in or not is, has the Hufflepuff the Hufflepuff Quidditch match been completed? And so what you do is you save the game.
Ravenclaw.
You quit out of the game. You go to the Quidditch League. You play the Ravenclaw match. You come back and Hagrid spawns. And so then you can skip. You could go to Diagon Alley and skip like 40 minutes of the game. I'm guessing that fell through the cracks. Because of the time constraint.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Now you know something. So another thing that I noticed going through the code is there's a lot of mentions of being very conservative with the RAM limit, and how you couldn't put certain strats in because it would consume too much memory, and you had to take it out of your levels and all the rest of it. So how hard was it to fit inside that 2 meg RAM limit?
Massively hard, mainly because you had a lot of textures. Textures go through memory. The famous thing was on Aladdin, for instance. When I joined Aladdin after they'd actually already been working on it, but they'd only had a small team working on it who'd never used the engine before. Mm-hmm. And we had things like Iago the parrot had I think it was a 512 by 512 texture of yellow for his toes.
Oh my goodness.
And of course, it was constantly running out of memory because everything had way too big. And I had to go, look, guys, that's yellow. You don't use like 1 pixel texture kind of level stuff. You've got this amount of texture available to you. That's it. Likewise, you had to be very conservative with the RAM on everything. Because the PlayStation 1, 2 megs of memory is nothing when you're sharing that for your graphics as well. And yeah, basically the whole thing was a constant cram what we can do in. If you want that, we're going to have to be careful with this kind of thing. It's very much a balancing job.
Yeah. Is that why I noticed with the classrooms where Harry Potter learns spells, there's an all caps comment that says only put this strat in if you are adding a spell. If you are not, remove it from your level. It consumes memory.
Yeah, the spell system was one of mine. It was a very big system because before Harry Potter, I'd actually been experimenting with gesture controls.
Oh.
I'd seen this little Japanese university thing done in JavaScript or Java that I don't know if it's still available. You might be able to find it. It's a thing called Teddy Bear, and it's a really cool little thing where people are drawing, like, say for instance, you draw a circle on the screen, and it works out that you want an actual sphere, for instance, and you can quickly draw a teddy bear by just doing gestures of different things and just sort of learning things like swipes or deletes and stuff like that. So it's very, very early days of what we now see as normal gesture controls, So I was experimenting with that. I said, well, theoretically, if you've got the PlayStation controller, you could do simple gestures, sort of left, right, up, down, that kind of thing, that makes sense. And I actually talked to Jamie, I think, at the time about this as a thing, and then Potter came up, and it's like, yeah, let's use this for the spell system. So the initial spell system was swish, 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 swish type stuff. It actually evolved into the timing kind of one, where hitting things on timer points and so on throughout it. But the actual thing to do all that sort of stuff was relatively heavy duty because you're controlling the character and his animations in front of doing the spell. You've got a full UI handling the spell system, and then whatever effects it's actually triggering on through the game. So yeah, if it wasn't going to be used in a level, then you had to be careful not to use it in there because it could take up a fair bit because you've got all the graphics being pulled in for all the stuff for the spells.
So as someone who's gone through the code, I've seen a lot of all caps comments, a lot of stuff that's been left over, where it's obvious that you may be working a bit late and you get a little bit heated in it. But there's one code that one comment that stood out to me, and I want to know who wrote it. If you could possibly know who wrote this, someone wrote Fayuvermush with like loads of H's on the end, and I'm like, who left that? Who wrote that?
Fayuvermush.
Yes, Fayu with 2 O's, Ver with 2 R's, and then Mush with like 4 H's.
Don't know.
It was a joke question anyway.
Yeah, I don't know on that one. There was a lot of late nights, and it was actually a very well run project in terms of the timing. The combination of Jamie and Seb as a producer and associate producer kind of got everything really well timed, which was good. So it wasn't as much crunch, for instance, as others, but it was very much maxing out what we could do in terms of the amount of work everyone was doing. And there was a few late nights.
Yeah, so time sensitive rather than crunch.
Yeah.
So a big question that we're hoping and praying and crossing our toes for. Do you have any beta or pre-release material from when you worked at Argonaut?
I theoretically do. I theoretically have all I'm sure I had the photos of everybody before they were edited into being wizards, for instance. And I still have some ASL stuff somewhere, but I don't think it's from Harry Potter. The problem is, and I have lots of people keep asking me for this stuff, and I was like, yeah, when I can get hold of my stuff in storage, I will try and get through these ancient hard drives full of random bits. And there may be still some surviving bits on there, but it's very hard to dig up, basically, and I can't access them at the moment. So there's a few people I've promised I'll get a hold of bits for if I can find them.
Oh, fantastic. So right now it's all in a storage unit somewhere?
Yeah, or on random drives been buried in boxes and stuff like that. And the problem is it's old PC drives, old Mac drives. There's some CDs that may or may not work. I may actually have a gold disc somewhere of one of the early. Actually, no, I think that one's a Croc prototype. I think I've got a few old ones, but a lot of them, especially in the Sony gold discs, just won't work on anything. Because you needed to have an actual PlayStation 1 dev machine to work on it. So I'd have to work with some, historical archiver or someone who's got all the tools to rip things so it can work on modern formats.
You know what? It's funny you mentioned that, because I was going to suggest, because I was involved in sort of Assembler Games and those guys who do a lot of sort of historical archiving of early video game stuff. I still have contact with some of those guys, so I was actually gonna reach out to you and see, well, if you've got the data, I could probably hook you up with someone who could, archive that for you if it's still kicking around. That is.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we've still got ST and Amiga floppies from games we wrote, from in the 90s. So there's all these sort of things there. We no idea if they work. We've actually got a Catweasel PC, but that hasn't actually been fired up in 15 years, I think. So we've no idea if that still works.
Yeah, you might turn it on, the power supply might blow, and that's it. Done. Forget about it.
Yeah, it's all a bit of an unknown, with a lot of these things. And obviously with these discs, it's kind of a one shot. If it blows up and catches and destroys that floppy, that's the only copy of that left.
Yeah, it's very careful archiving things, because no doubt with something like this, if you were able to find some beta stuff for this, we'd have to be very careful. It'd be like the Holy Grail almost. We'd be like, okay, don't damage it no matter what you do, because this will end terribly if we do.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. and of course, old hard drives, you have the problem that most of them will be likely suffering from stiction or something like that, because they haven't been spun up in years. So if I find them, I'll see what we can do, basically.
Fantastic. Well, that's all I wanted to hear, man. Thank you very much. So we already went over the thing of J.K. Rowling being involved. Was she just sort of like a backseat, or was she very hands-on with everything?
No, she was basically. We never saw her. The only sort of thing would be anything where it was going to be different, or we needed clarification. We'd send that up through the channel through EA, and EA would contact her, and it would come back down. And like I said, things like the spiders, for instance, was a no-no. That I think things like that were the only ones, and getting the okay to do the troll, for instance. We have more direct contact with EA themselves for things, and Warner Brothers.
Right. So we already went over some of the areas in the game that were removed. Do you remember any? I'm in the middle of an interview here. Do you remember any details on specific areas that were cut or specific areas that were scrapped?
Well, the only ones we know that were scrapped, that I remember that were scrapped, was the spiders. And that was just as a thing, we just used something else instead. There was the kitten, of course, got axed, which was a shame. We nearly lost the entire minecart level. This was because of the film. Because what happened was, in the film, they realised the film was overrunning. So it was going to be too long a film. So what we'll do is we'll cut the minecart in Gringotts to, they get on the minecart and they get off the minecart. They had this whole thing filmed where you're going whizzing through all the fantastical bits of the underground of Gringotts Bank. And it was basically like we had in the game. It was a big long minecart sequence. And because the film was too long, they cut it. And they came back to us. We were about 6 months in. The minecart level had just been finished. And it was all wonderful and everything, And it was a critical part of the game which was running short. And they said, oh, we can't use the minecart level because it's not in the film.
Oof.
And that team that were doing the minecart level were like,
gutted.
We just spent 2 months on this,
Ouch.
and flat out 2 months getting it. It's really good gameplay. It's fun. And EA and Warner said, sorry, it's not in the film. So this is where the producers went to battle, had a bit of a chat with them, and they said, well, look, seeing as you see the minecart in the film at the start and end, it's not actually a minecart run, but you see the minecart, you can still keep it in the game.
Ooh. So you saved it by the skin of your teeth, pretty much.
Yeah, that was a close one. This is where producers earn their pay, basically.
So, Whip, I believe you have an image of a pre-release screenshot that we found, because there was quite a few bits of pre-release screenshots and stuff that was released during the game being in development. But there was one area that didn't make it to the final game, but a screenshot of it came out. Whip, have you got that to hand, buddy?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just post that in the chat so that our man here, Aaron, can see it. Yeah, if you go on the chat there, it should have just been sent.
Yeah. Coming up. Right. That looks like it might be one of the towers.
Because this area was in the prototype pre-release screenshot, but it never made it to the final game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not an area I worked on, so...
No. So
could well be top of one of the towers. But look, yeah, there would have been a lot of that where we try various bits out, and because again of the tight schedule and the marketing guys obviously wanting stuff to work with, we'd have screenshots that they'd be using, so a lot of stuff wouldn't end up in the final game.
So you say that wasn't one of the areas you worked on. One thing that I noticed about the credits is that there wasn't a level development team. So who actually worked on levels per se?
Well, each team worked on levels. This was the thing. We'd all have levels to work on.
Right.
So I worked on the gameplay code side. I worked on things like the spell system and so on, which then got used by the other teams within all their levels. And most of the actual levels I ended up working on, that I remember working on anyway, were towards the end of the game where you're doing the sequence going up to Voldemort and the boss battle. So for instance, I wrote our team designed and did the fluffy bit, the sleepwalking troll, the chess set, and so on, things like that, and the original Voldemort boss battle. And then that got swapped out when the other teams did a Voldemort boss battle that they decided they were going to use instead. But the PC team had already nicked out one, so they ended up with my version.
So the version that's in the PC version was originally the PS1 version before the PS1 team replaced it with something else.
Yes, basically, yeah.
Huh, that's interesting. I didn't actually know that. I might have to go play the PC version now just to see what the original was like. So one thing that I noticed going through old footage, trying to find old pre-release beta stuff from the development of this game and from the development of the Harry Potter games, was that Harry Potter was at E3 2001, but I can only find footage of the PC version. Now, was the PS1 version shown, or did it...
I don't know. I have no idea, because we finished on time, and it was released on time with the film. The PC version was one that was overrunning, but it's entirely likely it was easier for them to show the pre-development PC version at E3.
Yeah.
Because if I remember correctly, the film and the game came out ready for Christmas 2001. So we'd have only started, if it was November 2001, we'd have only started in February or March or something like that.
Yeah.
So the PC version, they may have got a mock-up running or something that could be shown at EA earlier in the year, at E3 rather, earlier in the year, and then obviously that would all get changed. I mean, it's entirely like the PC version shown there was just just video basically.
High chance, probably. So you say that you had quite a lot of people from sort of EA overlooking the development of the game. Was there ever a time when EA had a look at it and they were like, this is a bit crap, in it? Or were they always happy with it? Like, what was their reception of seeing the game? How did they react to it?
Generally, I don't remember any times when they were having real problems with it. Jamie and Seb might be able to tell you more on that, because I suspect one of the factors in the smooth running and smooth production of it was that they were being very careful to keep us shielded from all the rubbish that was going on above us. From EA and Argonaut management and everyone, basically keep that out of the way so we can focus on getting on with writing the game. So I suspect any sort of major stuff like that was being shielded off. But we do know, we were hearing a lot about the PC version having lots of problems because the guys doing that over, I think, in Canada somewhere, some other company, were struggling to get it done, which is why eventually they said, well, can we just take a copy of what you've done so we can use that as a basis to get our stuff done quicker?
Yeah, because the PC version was very sort of ambitious. And, with the PS1 version, you already had the Croc engine, you already had ASL, you already had all that figured out. So, in a sense, they overshot, and that's why they got delayed so much.
Yeah, basically, it was just too big a project for them to do. And, of course, with the PC version, you're targeting a wide range of machines, whereas the PlayStation 1, you're just targeting the PlayStation 1.
Mm-hmm. So, the elements of the book that are left out of the game, I assume that was all design choices before anything was, before pen was put to paper, essentially.
Yeah. Essentially, it was a case of, right, what can we do? What works well from the book? The only one that was a maybe was Quidditch, because we at first thought maybe we can do a playable Quidditch game. And then when we had the design meeting on it, it's like, no. but the rest of it was a case of, this works. This is good we can see how well this would work in levels in the game. This would be fun. That's not so fun. That's basically a video sequence or whatever.
Yeah. Was there a playtesting session with Harry Potter on PS1? Because I remember in, I think, one of the tutorial rooms, there's a shadow on the floor where a bookcase would be, but there's no bookcase there. Was there ever like a playtesting thing where they playtested it and an element didn't work, so it got removed, or anything like that?
It's more likely that something got removed while the level was being moved around and the playtesters didn't spot it. Because we had a QA department at EA that we worked with closely. Certainly, EA and Argonaut's own QA department, who at the time, this was before they changed it. The original setup of Argonaut's QA was really cool in that we'd have our own testers within any given team. So, and we could talk to them immediately rather than having to submit bug reports that would go through a chain of command and eventually get back to us 2 days later with something with feedback. So if there's a bug that we wanted investigating, say for instance something's doing something a bit weird and it's not obvious from the remarks from the tester what exactly is going on, we could just talk to the tester and they'd say, not a problem. Which is why, like for instance on Aladdin, one of the classic ones was one of the playtesters came up with a bug saying the game is tilted by about 5 degrees. The camera seems to be tilted by about 5 degrees. And we're like, that's really weird because our camera system doesn't have any rotation that way. There's no roll on our camera. So technically it can't be tilted by 5 degrees. And this is an engine thing. So because our camera was part strap control, part engine, but anything like roll on the camera would be engine side. The engine code is like, we can't work this out. And I thought, I might have an idea. So I popped down basically a floor down to our QA department and asked to see the tester. And he's there, sat in front of his PlayStation test kit with his little Trinitron or whatever screen, and I said, right, so this show me this game where it's tilted. He shows me the game, and sure enough, it's tilted 5 degrees. And I get a bit of cardboard and prop it up the corner of his monitor, and his monitor's now straight, and it's not tilted 5 degrees.
So his monitor was on an angle.
Yeah, his monitor had the foot got knocked off somehow, and his monitor was on an angle, and he didn't realise, and it looked like game was tilted 5 degrees. So he put it down as a bug, as you do, because you never know. It might not. It might be something else. You put it down, and credit to him. He noted it, and he just hadn't noticed that, So we fixed it. Bug fixed.
Bug fixed. There we go. It's that easy. So, speaking of sort of in-game glitches and bugs and all the rest of it, one glitch that is incredibly useful for our speedruns is what's called Fireseed Skip, where essentially you're supposed to go and collect these fire seeds for Hagrid, but if you do a glitch involving clipping into the acute angles on the wall, Harry can jump up the wall and jump over the fence and completely skip that section of the game. So,
right.
That's one thing that should have been in your bug reports, was that acute angles in the engine that are less than 90 degrees, Harry can sort of walk into the wall if he runs up against it. I'm not sure if it ever got patched, but...
It should have been, basically that's part of early design. Remember I was saying about the auto jump, and we only had simple raycasts for our collision detection.
Yeah.
The collision detection for wall collisions and everything was very simple. Some of it was handled in the engine semi-automatically, but it was a very, very basic collision detection system. And if you started doing acute angles, you could force the player through it depending on what speed you're going at. So it was supposed to be that any levels designed either didn't have those angles or would have a deliberate invisible collision flat in front of them to stop you being able to go through, to basically smooth out the angle.
And in that section of the map, they just forgot to add that invisible wall.
So someone missed it, and the testers didn't manage to catch it.
Well, it took us about a decade to find it when we were speedrunning the game, and then we found it and we were like, holy smokes, this skips like 15 minutes of the game. Fantastic, you know. So we were talking about Gringotts earlier, and one of the moments in the speedrun is where the Gringotts part of the speedrun is basically unskippable, and it's 20 minutes of on rails in a speedrun that's like an hour 10. So I will ask you now, a developer of the game, is there a Gringotts skip?
I don't think so.
No.
It wasn't my mini team that was doing the Gringotts bit, but if it's essentially an on rails timing thing. So if it's all timing based, then probably not.
So one thing that someone's pointed out in the chat that's quite interesting is that glitch I was talking about in Fireseeds, it's not just in Harry Potter 1, it's in Harry Potter 2 as well. Because it uses,
wouldn't be too surprised.
Yeah, it uses
same
the same
engine.
geometry. Same geometry as well, and no one went back to fix it. So same bug.
Because if it was in Hogwarts, they would have. I wasn't on Harry Potter 2 because I'd moved off to another project by then. But they would have recycled Hogwarts with some tweaks for Harry Potter 2.
And another thing that I noticed about Harry Potter 2 is they use quite a lot of elements from Harry Potter 1 that were sort of scrapped, and then they brought it back for the sequel. Do you think that was them getting lazy, or do you think that was just them being resourceful? Or
no, a lot of things that would have got scrapped in Harry Potter 1 were this. We like this idea, but there is no way to get it done in the timescale because we need to develop it further. So a lot of times you do that as a developer. You keep your notes for it and you keep the code for it, and you basically say, well, if we like nowadays, if you update the game, that becomes a thing, or the sequel in those days, we'll come back to that and maybe it'll be useful. So you'll get a lot of things then in Harry Potter 2 where it's like, well, we've got more time to play with. We don't have to spend all this time building up Hogwarts anymore. Because no one, of course, has realised that there's that skippable bit in the wall there. So the bug report's like 10 years away for that one, so that's not a problem. So we've got time. We've got time to work on these things that we couldn't do on Harry Potter 1 that we could use here.
Right, I see. So it was just sort of reusing the assets, and also I assume that maybe in the book there was quite a few things in the Harry Potter 2 book that wasn't in the Harry Potter 1 book, so J.K. Rowling was more lenient with saying, okay, yeah, you can use that because I've wrote it in now.
Exactly, yeah. There's a lot of stuff we kind of developed on the basis of it in the Harry Potter universe, but then realised we can't use it because it's not in the first book or the film. So, okay, we can't use that, but there's some stuff on it here. So we'll save that one for Harry Potter 2.
Fantastic. So, Harry Potter on PS1 is the 6th best-selling game on the PlayStation. Did anyone at Argonaut expect it to be as successful as it was, or did it come as a surprise?
No, that was going to be our big payoff game. It was the basic thing with Argonaut at the time was one of the nice things was that the team actually got a very small royalty split from any title. So whatever Argonaut made, a certain chunk of it was split off for the team to get paid from that. But Argonaut did a really, really low percentage deal with EA, just as we want to do this. So Argonaut got some tiny percentage off EA for the whole rights. So basically, those of us who weren't in the production, the high-end production team, didn't actually get that much off it. I got to make a down payment on my Mini with it, and that was about it.
Fair enough. So I remember as a kid, I'm going back to when I was playing it as a kid, because I was one of these kids who grew up with the game. I remember quite vividly the sort of dungeon and sewers part, and especially the part with Peeves being quite scary as a kid. So how did that make it through? Like, did no one in QA say, hang on, that might be a bit too much, or weren't you thinking about that kind of thing, or...
I don't know. I think mostly because most of us were brought up by reading things like Roald Dahl and so on. So you know, it's like, God, this isn't scary at all. You know, no one's dying. So you know, generally speaking, just because before she started killing everybody off. You know, if no one's actually dying and it's not actually out to terrorise you, then generally speaking, that's not a problem. And I don't think even EA were too fussed. We'd had a lot of problems on Aladdin with Disney because the European version is the good version. The American version, which was finished slightly later, where we had to go back over it, had been dumbed down because Disney decided that the kids in America didn't actually play games that well and couldn't handle the concept of multiple branches or having to do things on split timing or, you know, solving puzzles. So it was almost a walkthrough game. So a lot of stuff got cut on the American version, and we were worried about that with Potter. But fortunately, EA and Warner Brothers were pretty good on letting us get on with designing a game rather than just, you know, a cinematic experience, as they call it.
So it's funny you say that, because it's almost like the opposite is true for Harry Potter on PS1, because looking at the build dates, the NTSC version was finished first, and then it was PAL, and then it was all the translations, and then I think it was the Japanese version that was finished last.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, so
a lot of that's just purely down to getting through Sony approval and mastering and all that kind of stuff. So the development time for us, it was pretty much done as this is the final version kind of thing that will be for Europe and America ready for the film. And of course, back then, films came out in America before they came out in Europe as well. So, but although I think Harry Potter came out in the UK at least at the same time as it came out in the States. I can't remember exactly. I know it was a Christmas release sort of thing. Yeah. So the whole timing from our point of view was getting it done so that Sony could prove it and get it produced in time to come out with the film.
And then with the Japanese version, they released it after the first film was out, so they didn't particularly care on that one.
Yeah, because the Japanese translation would take forever anyway, just because you've got to do a whole load of art assets just for the text.
Yeah. So speaking of the sort of regional differences, notably the NTSC version runs at 60 Hz, PAL runs at 50. Because of that, the PAL version of the game is actually about 18% slower than the NTSC version because of the difference between 60 and 50 Hz. Was that intentional, or was that something that you just had to live with?
It's a feature of the Croc engine, unfortunately. Yeah, it's a case of you can design around it to a degree, but you couldn't really do frame rate independent stuff without breaking a lot of stuff in the way the Croc engine works. So not nicely anyway.
So it was just a limitation of that engine that prevented you from making it any faster.
Yeah.
So while we were looking around for different versions of the game, we found English, American English, all the different regional translations, but we found a few unofficial Russian versions that were made by sort of Russian, I guess you would call them bootleggers, but because EA never released an official Russian version and the piracy scene in Russia was strong, they sort of redubbed the original Harry Potter game with Russian text and voiceover work. And the question in the speedrunning community is, should these versions be legal to use in a speedrun? Like, because there's one argument that's like, it shouldn't be legal because Argonaut didn't work on it, and then there's another argument that's like, it should be legal because it's the fastest version of the game. Because they speak in Russian, they get through it so quickly. So it's a bit of a debate here. We're figuring that we can have you as the adjudicator. Right,
okay. I can see your problem here. One is, see, I'm not a speedrunner myself. I've seen a few speedruns. I'm more of a general explorer, but although I am one for, oh god, I'm bored of this, I'll skip this, I just need to get to this next bit, so I can understand it. If you're using bugs in the game to skip through sections that we didn't actually spot until it turns out 10 years later, technically you're doing the same as the Russians by just talking faster. So it's kind of maybe the Russians are kind of like Formula One speedrun because they've got sort of souped up, video sections, whereas you're like Formula 2 because or yours is classic speedrun, because you're using the game as it was written and only bugs that are in the game as it's written. See, the other problems, of course, is the hacked versions of the games. You don't know for absolutely certain whether they've tweaked anything else other than the video sections, for instance, in the speech. So yeah, there's a thing to be said there that if you're doing like a Guinness World Records kind of speed run, you would only want to use official versions of the game. If you're how fast can we get through this game, absolutely, then yeah, whatever version there is, and keep your fingers crossed it's not been too hacked.
So what you're saying is that there maybe should be like a specifically Russian only version of the speedrun that is dedicated to that version, perhaps.
Yeah, it's like in drag racing, they do the different classes of cars, don't they? So you've got the basic hot rods, which are street legal cars that have been souped up, but they still are street legal. And then you've got the super, over the top things that are absolutely not street legal, but they go a lot faster.
So there we go. There's the verdict. The Russian version is technically legal on a technicality, technically.
Yeah, technically.
So there we go. Fantastic.
The point is, very simple one is if it's enjoyable, if it's fun, then I wouldn't want to ban it, really.
Oh yeah, it's the same game. The only difference is I don't know what they're saying. So other than that, other than that, we're fine. I've come to the end of our list of questions, so I can either make up some or I can hand it to Whip. Have you managed to come up with any questions?
Sure. I guess you could call me one of the forefathers for defining 100% in the game, and my question is mostly based on when you guys, we obviously have seen some comment codes of things that were removed, but the biggest problem back then was, at least when I started, we didn't know what defined 100%. So, do you remember what you guys thought about when you made the percentage counter?
No, I'm just thinking who actually did the percentage counter. I suspect it's something that was done towards the end as what can we actually count just to give it an extra feature, so for completion for replays. Rather than an early design thing, because we didn't really know what was going to be in the final game, and there's always this chance, certain things would get cut, so you can't really design it too well towards the end of the game. So no, there would be some thought put into what it was, but it would be more likely something added on at the end.
Because each save file in the game keeps track of what percentage of the way you are through the game, and so you don't know what kind of influences that percentage. No, I'm trying to think who would actually know on that one. It would probably be a strat team. Ben's probably the guy who would have come across that one. But Steve Jarrett might know. He was lead designer, so he might remember it. But again, it's so long ago because they might not remember.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fair enough. Well, another thing that comes to my mind is going back to that skip that I mentioned, where you could clip through the wall. And the much bigger, what we call Quidditch abuse, because we're effectively abusing Quidditch to get Hagrid to spawn in. When you do that glitch, because Gringotts is much later on in the game, it's like near the end after you've done the dungeons and Peeves and all the rest of it, it gives you all of the spells, even though you haven't attended those classes. So, was what spells the player should have, was that determined like on a per level basis, or was it like...
Yeah. Well, it was basically for gameplay. While you're wandering around the castle, you've kind of got whatever spells you've learned, I think it was, so that you could explore with things. But especially for the end sequence, a lot of them it was absolutely critical you had these spells. So the simple thing was, well, we just drop these spells in for these levels.
I see. So let me try and think of some more questions here, because we've still got plenty of time. I didn't expect to get through these questions as quick as we did. But you've been incredibly great with your answers, so thank you very much. What was the most annoying part about working on Harry Potter? Do you remember any parts that were like specifically, teeth clenching, or was it pretty easy?
Not having the direct access to the material, I think, was the worst one for the artists. For us, not being able to bump up anything with the actual with ASL, or actually to do some tweaks directly to the engine, I think, was a long-running problem.
Yeah.
There was a little fun between me and Steve Jarrett, who is our lead designer and the designer I work with for stuff, where each day he would come in with some wild new idea of something to do that I'm thinking, oh my god, this will take us months to do, and we'd have totally unreasonable on my side of it, because at the time I was very much had it trained into me we need to do this fast. Mm-hmm. So it's like I was burning him down really fast, and it turned out that I the way I worked with designers is, if you can prove to me that you really, really want this, then I can seriously look at it. But if a designer isn't like up to completely fighting me for it, then yeah, you're probably going to get shot down. And I was shooting things down a little bit too much, I think, because I was getting kind of wound up by some of the ideas. So I was being quite unfair on Steve on that one, because some of the ideas I suspect might have been a bit better, but we might have overrun, maybe, But I was somewhat stressed out, I think, from previous projects, so I wasn't really, as fair on him as I should be on that one, I think.
Fair enough. So from first starting on the game, you said maybe sometime around February, March-ish. How long did it take before you had something that looked vaguely like Harry Potter? Like, how long was it?
About 2 weeks.
About 2 weeks.
Yeah, because when we started, we already had an idea of what we wanted to do. We had artists who had already worked with the engine, because we pulled everybody off teams that already knew what they were doing with the engine and what they were doing with the tools. The artists very rapidly prototyped some stuff that looked vaguely Hogwartsy. Ben got a version of Harry up and running pretty quickly, and I'd already started on messing around with the spell system and so on. I think I prototyped the initial spell system in a week. We rewrote it several times, but we had something very, very quickly. That was one of the features really with that whole system.
And what's the first area that you guys designed that made it into the final game?
Good question. I think it might have been the areas in Hogwarts outside the bedrooms or whatever. Some of the general halls would have been done fairly early. Some of the jumping stuff, because we needed to get the jumping stuff working, but I don't know if that was particularly finished. That would be simple prototype areas. I was working on the spell systems, so I vaguely remember the spell lesson being one of the first ones I saw as an actual recognisable room. So I think it's the initial spell tutorial stuff. I suspect were probably the first areas I saw that would have been close to finishing. But a lot of it, you do a very rapid prototype first that you can put everything into, and then it would go backwards and forwards to the artists to tart up.
So what you're saying is that like the geometry of the level would be done first, and then that would be handed to the art team to kind of put the assets in.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have essentially a kit of parts in the Croc Editor, where you basically start initially with literally just cubes and floors and a few walls and bits and pieces like that you can do a level with. Then the artists basically start designing better versions of those for specific areas, and so on. And everything was done as cubes, essentially. So I think they're probably 2 meter by 2 meter in kind of real worldy kind of sense cubes. And then you slot these together as essentially a 2D map. And then the whole thing would actually have 2D or 3. It might have been we actually did get a 3D map system working with it. I never remember now, but it was a very, very simple system. It was very easy to use. But then the art team could just design new cubes and you'd slot it together. So it's like working on a 2D map editor where you're designing tiles, but the tiles are in 3D.
I see. That makes sense because we've had a person in the community who's actually tried to sort of reverse engineer and decompile the maps, and one of the first discoveries that he made when he was decompiling the maps was that it was in tiles. So we're wondering about that system and how it worked, and you've gone into some more detail there, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, but by making it tile-based, it made it a lot quicker to work with because you're not having to do a 3D editor where you're having to manipulate things and position things in 3D. And if I don't know if you've played with things like Unity or anything like that nowadays, where you're trying to make games in 3D, it's that level of difficulty above and beyond doing a 2D, a tile-based engine, because you're having to be precise with everything. With this, you could literally slap things together pretty quickly. So prototyping the level was very fast, and then you could take it away and completely tart it up.
So someone in the chat has mentioned that crunch mode culture is in the spotlight recently. What's your thoughts on crunch time and like the stress that it puts developers and programmers under?
It shouldn't happen. I went through crunch a lot of my time at Argonaut in one form or another, and really bad crunch on some projects, and it did a lot of damage to me, physically and mentally. And that was one of the reasons why I left Argonaut to start my own company up, because I just didn't want to be. I was getting myself into being quite a nasty person. I was getting quite angry. I had one producer, for instance, wanted me on the project because I was the only person who could make the lead designer cry.
Wow.
Wow.
Because he had a problem with the lead designer being a bit too in his face and getting too much control, and he wanted to balance that with someone who could, it wasn't right. Basically, The whole thing was just really, a lot of stuff there wasn't right. So it was a case of I kind of had to decompress rather a lot after Argonaut. And there was, again, it was great people there, and one of the reasons you end up doing crunch is because you like working with these people and you want things to do well.
Yeah.
So the games industry has this culture of we really like doing this. We could get paid a lot more if we did something more boring instead, but we like doing this, so we're doing it. And unfortunately, that did get exploited by some people. Like I said, Potter was a little bit crunchy, but not in a bad way. I think from where I was on it, I was still suffering from Aladdin, which was incredibly crunchy. It was 18 months of hell, basically. That one was a nasty project because of lots of reasons. One being Disney basically being complete pain over the whole thing, but lots of internal issues as well at Argonaut.
I
with
think
that
it's
one.
funny because you can actually see that sort of breakdown as you go through the commentary and the sort of code notes in Argonaut games. In Croc 2, it's kind of more professional and refined. Hey, could you fix this? Hey, could you sort this out? And then by the time you get to Alien Resurrection, it's like, this doesn't fucking work.
Oh,
this is
those
shit.
guys.
Fucking, yeah.
Alien Resurrection. The other teams. I wasn't on Alien Resurrection. My brother actually did the soundtrack for it. He was on the sound team, so he did sound effects for that one. But he was only on it for a part of the project because it ran for 7 years, and it actually went through 3 game designs.
Oh my
Originally, Alien Resurrection was going to be a 2D shooter like Alien Breed, and then and I remember watching the film, and the film goes, "Oh, coming soon, the game," and this is like the film was out 3 years or something before the game. That one, the guys ended up working on that one. It was a job for life almost. They put their lives into getting this thing done, and credit to them, they got the game finished. And it was good, but it took a lot out of them. One of the guys I remember, the lift arrived in reception. The door pinged, opened, and he fell out flat on his face because he just collapsed in the lift on the way down, working so hard. And that was a bit of a turning point for him, and he started, changing a bit of his lifestyle to suit, and nowadays he's healthy and successful, so that's good, you know. But then the other one, of course, was Malice, which was the project you didn't want to end up on. Lots of people got stuck on Malice. I actually ended up having, they needed me to help them out with some stuff as they were getting towards a particular crunch for a deadline. And they had 4 days to go before a deadline, and there's a whole load of stuff that wasn't in the game, that should have been in the game. And it's like, well, Aaron, can we please get you on this project to help them out? And I said, well, no, because anyone who goes on that project, they don't get let go from the project. They're on there permanently, and I don't want to be stuck on that project. So I had an actual, in writing, I had a thing saying that I was only on the project for 4 days, and that was it. And I had them sign it and everything. And I was on the project for 4 days, got a load of stuff done. They hit the deadline. They didn't release anything because they changed a load of things, and that stuff all got cut, because most of that game got cut before it actually got released.
That's crazy. Yeah, it sounds like sort of late 90s, early 2000s Argonaut was a bit of a mess, to be honest.
This is a weird thing. Bits of it were, bits of it weren't. There was a lot of odd stuff going on that I don't know because I wasn't part of the production teams and stuff. You hear sort of things. They were, you know, they obviously ran out of money, you know, because they went bust just after I left, and before I left, they'd already let a load of people go because some projects they'd sunk a lot of money into hadn't done well enough, and they were relying on things like Harry Potter, which was basically that saved the company for a while, I think. But they didn't get that good a royalty cut from that, so yeah, it wasn't a great deal. And unfortunately, we ended up doing things like Catwoman. Trying to do another Harry Potter kind of thing, but the film wasn't up to it. What they wanted us to do for the gameplay wasn't up to it, and it was generally a sort of forced crunch that had people collapsing. I ended up out of it for 2 weeks because I caught chickenpox midway through it, because my immune system had been so clobbered by all the crunch and just general hellish working. And there was 100+ of us on one floor of the building that wasn't really designed for that, and I just got ill and couldn't do anything. And that was at the point where I'd been doing side projects with my brother Adam, working with a publisher in the States for Macintosh games, which I was allowed to under my contract because it wasn't conflicting with what Argonaut did, and some historical rules about how I ended up at Argonaut. I ended up with this weird contract where I could do that, and they said, well, you know, we want you to work exclusively on stuff for us. How much will it take? And so basically, you know, fund us with a year's wages equivalent, and we'll clear off and we'll publish through you guys and do that. You know, we'll do that solo. And we did that, and everyone laughed because, oh, you know, there's no money in working on Apple games. You know, this is in 2004. No money in working on Apple games at all. You know, so you guys are crazy. You know, of course the iPhone comes along, and we had the first million-selling iPhone game. So.
Congratulations on that, by the way. I was wondering when what you worked on after Argonaut would come up, because I actually didn't know how rich your history was as a developer until the lead up to this interview, where I've been doing my research, and you've worked on a ton of stuff.
I've written over 100 games that people have played. I qualify the ones that people have actually been able to play outside of my dev studio as games I have written, because they are games. And I didn't used to qualify a lot of them until the iPhone came along, because it used to be a game would be something that takes a year to write at least, kind of thing. And I wrote a lot of what we call 10-liners in Amos, where it's an entire game in 10 lines of code. But it's not like, you know, vaguely looks like. I actually managed to write Elite in 10 lines with like millions of planets and everything, you know. And I did a version of an official version of Sensible Soccer, as ratified by the guys, because we were at a convention together. And I said, look, if I write a 10-line version of your game, can you say it's official? And they said, yep. And I did it. It's only one player aside, but it's the official 10-line version of Sensible Soccer.
Incredible.
So I did quite a few of those, but actually I think we've done 30 or so games and or variations of games on the iPhone, for instance.
I think that's quite interesting, because there's when it comes to programming challenges, there's people like you who try and write it in as little lines as possible, and then there's people also who try and write it in as little space as possible. Like they'll try and fit an entire game into like 4 kilobytes or something. And
that's always a challenge.
Someone's made a version of Breakout that fits on the boot sector of a disk or something, where it's like 300 bytes. It's like, how do you even begin to do that? It blows my mind.
A lot of it is understanding the game, and especially how the game actually works, and the absolute pure essentials of the game. That's the important bit. Once you know that, then you can work out what's the actual minimum thing you need to do to make it work. I mean, Breakout was one of the games that, as a game writer and as a designer and a programmer, I keep coming back to in my earlier days, because, for instance, I was working on playing on the Apple II. My early programming years, I was working on all sorts of different basic machines, but the first one I actually had, which was years after I first learned the program, was an Apple II, or Apple II clone called a Banana II. And Breakout is actually one of the simple games that was in it that Steve Wozniak had actually written using AppleSoft BASIC. In fact, it was the integer BASIC version, which was a simpler version of BASIC on it. And you'd use the low-res mode, which is it's only 40 blocks across by about 30 down. Mm-hmm. So you've got this low-resolution blocky mode, which is perfect for Breakout. So it's a very easy one. You get to learn very, very quickly how the game works. There's very simple physics of reflecting off the wall by reversing X or Y, depending on which wall you're working on. So you just reversing the deltas. And doing a bit of simple spin physics, like if you hit the bat and the bat is moving, apply the bat's delta ever so slightly to the X of the ball, so you get a different spin as you hit the bat and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's all really simple stuff that you learn, and then you can start applying that to other games, and then you start seeing how games work, which does make it a pain in the neck to play a lot of games, because you can see how they're working and how they're tricking you. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is fooling the player into having fun.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, we've got a few questions that have come up in the chat. I'm not going to keep you too long, because we've got plenty of answers here, and you've been an absolute charm. It's been great having you. We've got Mylin SR, who says, considering the meme status of the PS1 graphics, can you ask what the devs thought about the character models? So I don't know if you've seen this, but the PS1 Hagrid, for example, has become a meme for being particularly low poly and low texture, and a bit of a sort of a meme. But what did you feel about the character models at the time? Did you think, oh, this is cutting edge? This
at the time they were. That was the thing, because it wasn't. The PS2 was coming up, mm-hmm. and the PS1 is like, yeah, that's pretty much what we can get away with the engine we've got, which did restrict us a little in terms of what could be done, because it didn't have very good blending and stuff on the motion. But in terms of what we could do memory-wise, mainly because the levels needed to be big and expansive levels, that was cutting edge for what we could get away with that, and it looked recognisable for the characters, which was important, I think, at the time. And I do remember when the cinematic trailer came out for the game, and we were all really, really pissed off because they did this CGI trailer, which has not in-game footage, that looked worse than our in-game footage. Ooh. So, yeah, it was like, yeah, we got quite annoyed at that. It's like, well, why didn't they just show the bloody game?
Yeah, that's a shame. But what's your reaction to sort of like the modern reception to Harry Potter on PS1? Because I personally enjoyed it quite a lot as a kid. I played the pants off it as a kid. But nowadays I see quite a lot of people sort of almost ripping on it for being like so low poly and so within like deadlines. How do you feel about like the current sort of meme status that Harry Potter on PS1 has accrued over the years?
I just say, well, at the time it was 10 million people had played it, bought it when it was launched. It was the 10th best-selling game of all time when it launched, and I have no idea how many people have played it and had fun with it now. So if they're having fun with it as a meme, cool. It's just extending the fun. I mean, yeah, it wasn't designed to be. It wasn't going to be Grand Theft Auto as a groundbreaking game. It wasn't supposed to be a groundbreaking game. It was supposed to be faithful to the film and the book. I think it was in that order as well. It was the film was our primary. it was got to be faithful to the film and the book. It had to be fun,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise there's no point in doing it. So basically the idea was that it was primarily for Harry Potter fans. Everyone else, bonus.
Yeah. I remember specifically as a kid, I had great fun with it because I was on a sort of a lower class income, and we didn't have enough money to afford our own copies of games, so we did the whole mod chip thing. Yeah.
The blockbusters thing, yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember when I was 2 years old, my dad came in with a photocopied sheet of every PlayStation 1 game that had been released until that time. He said, okay, what I want you to do is go through a market and highlight 20. And I have a friend who will copy you 20 games and give you a mod-chipped PS1, and that's your Christmas gift. And one of the ones I highlighted was Harry Potter on PS1. So your game was within the first 20 games I played as a kid. So for that, I must say thank you for the memories and all the rest of it, and thank you for traumatizing me with Peeves. First time I cried at a video game was with Peeves in the dungeons.
I don't remember who worked on Peeves. I'd have to find out who was on the team actually did him. I remember there was something about putting him in at some point. I can't remember. It might have been Ben actually did the code for him. But yeah, it would be a design decision rather than a coder decision about getting him in the game.
Fair enough. We have a guy in the chat called Sir Eekster who says, I love Aaron, he was a blast to work with. I don't know who Sir Eekster is, but apparently he's someone who worked with you and enjoyed his time working with you, so that's wholesome to see.
Right. I guess that's Matt. I'm guessing it's Matt. Probably. You never quite tell with thingy screen names, but yeah.
We got another.
Yeah, it looks in. Yeah.
Yeah. But we've got another speedrunner in the chat who says that it's easy to look back and judge it through modern eyes, but back in the day it was fun as a kid, and I think that's the main root of Argonaut. Going back throughout all your games is that despite some at the end that were a bit missed, like you mentioned Catwoman and some of the other ones, but throughout the history of Argonaut, that's the main thing I notice is that instead of it being a focus on graphics or a focus on amazing gameplay, it's a focus on fun, and it's what makes Argonaut games sort of timeless in a sense, because the graphics, you forget about it, the shortcomings, you forget about it, you focus on the fun, and that's what makes the games last as long as they do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole retro scene now. Like, you look at half the indie games being done now, none of them are doing modern graphics. They're all trying to do retro graphics, although a lot of us who actually did retro graphics in the retro days are like, well, that's not retro graphics because you're designing it for a high-res screen, and retro graphics were really for a CRT. You get a completely different look when you're designing pixels to blend on a CRT than you do with a modern screen. And I mean, basically, design it for 320 by 240, and you're in there.
Fair enough. We have a speedrunner in here who asks, any idea how the Toad RNG was built? Now, I remember you said that you didn't work on Gringotts, so you probably wouldn't know that much, would you?
No. Yeah, was it Toad RNG?
Yeah, basically, in one section of Gringotts, there's a witch's house that you go into. Basically, you go to Gringotts, you get the currency to buy stuff from these huts in Gringotts, and one of them is you go in and you buy toads, but the toads are in these boxes, and there's like 10 boxes on the top floor, 10 boxes on the lower floor, and which box the toad spawns into is like RNG. It's a random number generator. And so what that speedrunner was asking was, do you...
Of course, that would slow you down. Yeah, it is pure RNG. It will literally be... again, it won't be an array. There will be individually spawned objects, and the strat will have picked one object at random. It will just pick a number, and that object, when that object spawns, if it's that number, ping, I'm a toad.
Right, okay, fair enough. That makes sense. Sir Eekster is Matt. You were right on your guess.
Yeah, Matt was great to work with. He was fun.
Fantastic. It's good to see this sort of unifying of old developers from back in the day sort of coming here, because I didn't think that this would happen, but it's great to see sort of... there was another one we tried to get on as well. Who was the other one we tried to get on, Whip?
That was Tom Kermode.
Yeah. Oh, Tom, yeah, Tom's cool. I'm not sure, he's not a pyromaniac anymore. At the time, he was renowned as being a pyromaniac, but...
we had a talk with Tom, and he gave us sort of the beginnings of how we could decompile the engine and the maps and all the rest of it. But he wasn't interested in doing a sit-down interview like yourself today. So thank you very much for your willing. You've helped uncover a lot of mysteries here today. So thank you very much.
No problem.
Yeah, it's been absolutely great. And we've got Plushiness in the chat saying, thanks for making PS1 Hagrid. So, there you go. That's your legacy. So we're coming up now to about an hour and a half. I think you said you had an hour and a half, right? Or did you say you had
Yeah. I think. What time is it now? It's kind of on 9 and a bit. Should be good for a couple more questions. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, first things first. Seeing as we were talking about the future, what project are you working on at the moment?
Well, the current project I'm working on is secret, unfortunately, as most of them are. We've still got Strange Flavor running, and all our games now we're licensing through a cool bunch called Game Club, who, what they've done is, the early days of the iPhone, there were some really good games on the early days of the iPhone, but unfortunately, it takes a lot of time and effort to keep them going for 10 years. The end result is that a lot of devs have dropped out and their games have disappeared from the stores. And of course, a lot of those games don't make it across to Android either because of the expense of actually doing them.
Yeah. So
this Game Club bunch came about through actually one of the guys that contacted us is a guy called Eli who was actually the producer at one of the top iPhone and Android online magazines reviewing games and so on. And what they're doing is they're contacting the devs of all the classic games, licensing them, and then their coders are going over them and revamping them and updating them for modern times, which we just can't do. We just don't have the time to do all our games and keep them up to date. There's just so much stuff to do. They're doing them, and they're doing a really good job of it. And then they've done it as a system where you essentially do a subscription, and you've got 100 plus games to play on at any time you want. No ads, no in-app purchases, as if you just bought the games.
Nice.
And you can play all the games as much as you want. And now they've added in stuff that weren't in the original games, things like leagues and challenges, so that you're interacting with all the other players and stuff. So, and it's great for us because we were struggling to keep things afloat. We weren't making enough money off our games to actually spend enough time to work on them and do a new game to try and make some money to keep working on all. So they come along, license them, and we get a decent royalty off it, and they do all the work. And they're doing really good marketing, and people are actually enjoying playing the games. So we're finding some of our old games, like Any Landing, people are playing a lot more now than they used to, which is great news. And they're doing, so Game Club is definitely on to look at, and they're also porting a load of them to Android as well, which we just couldn't do. There's no practical point for us in that one. So they're opening it up to new players, and then because we've not, Adam and I have had to do contract work mostly to make ends meet. So now we're working for a cool company in Canada called Shifty Eye Games. We've been doing, last year we did a whole load of games for Apple Arcade, and now we're working on a new project for Shifty Eye, which is of course top secret, so I can't say. So most of my time's on that and maintaining the previous ones we've done with them.
So 2 last questions have just come to my head, and then I'll throw it to Whip and see if he's got anything. So my first question was, if you could add anything to Harry Potter on PS1 looking back, what would you add?
I don't know, actually.
Like, is there anything that you feel like is missing that could like increase the gameplay experience, or?
Well, personally, I'd want to put my original boss level back, but that was a design decision. I was overruled. That's fair enough. The new boss battle worked, but I think at the time I was quite grumpy that might have got cut. But that's natural. But no, I think. There's a lot of stuff we would like to have kept in, like the little bits of Easter eggy kind of things, where you can explore more. But they got trimmed for basically practical reasons. A lot of the time, things are trimmed purely because there's no practical way to test them to be absolutely certain they'll be solid in the release version of the game. And of course, back then there was no updates. So once it's burned to a gold disc, that was it. So you'd be into a lot of expense if it turned out to not work, and Sony wanted to remaster all 10 million discs.
Yeah.
So
problem. So on the subject of Easter eggs, are there any Easter eggs in the game that people haven't found yet? Is there anything that's like been a secret for like 20+ years that only the developers know about, perhaps?
I don't think so, no, because we had to declare everything.
Ah.
Like I said, I think Tom did actually completely take the kitten out. I don't know if the kitten's hidden away somewhere, but that had been strat code, so we just disabled that. The chicken thing was, I think, early prototype that we just carried over from Aladdin. So that might be a room sitting on a disc somewhere, but the likelihood is that's gone as well. So the only real Easter egg is the wizard portraits. So yeah, and that would be an interesting. If you're on a speedrun challenge, is getting all the wizard portraits, getting screenshots of all the wizard portraits.
Ah, there we go. We've got a new category there.
Because there's a whole bunch of developers like Matt and myself, and I put a thing on Facebook to my Facebook friends because I'm still in touch with most of the Argonaut crew, saying, hey, I'm doing this interview in an hour or so. Can anyone remember anything about the game? Because I can't.
Oh, fantastic!
And we mentioned about we'd all sort of that's the only Easter egg we could remember being in the game was the deliberate one that put in the wizard photos in.
Fair enough. Okay, well that's great. So my last question, and then I'll throw it over to Whip. So when I was working on the tool-assisted speedrun of the game, I noticed how clever you were with all of the sort of hex values and how a certain hex value represented a certain thing and how you had it all sort of laid out and structured, and it all like logically made sense. But there was one part that never made sense. Why is Harry's top speed 181?
That would have been tuning. With something like that where it's subjective, that would have been basically Ben and his team would have been playing the character, and it would be what feels right, looks right with the animation, with the character, and it would have been would have a black box and a dial. Well, I did a lot of things with my designers where the designer wouldn't be able to actually directly tune things normally because that's in code. So what I'd do is I'd give them a black box and I'd say, right, here's some parameters you can play with. Here's a couple of debug dials. Tune these. These are on this controller. Adjust these dials, and you can tune things. And Ben did the same thing with Harry. So his design team would basically play the character and adjust the character and just tune things like the speed so it felt right. And it's all about feel on things like player controls.
Fantastic.
Well, Whip, have you got any questions?
Yes, a couple of recent discoveries we made. For example, we found a game share code, or that was an old discovery, but there's a game share code where you can program one of the buttons to input a speed value for Harry.
Ooh.
And one thing we found, for example, was that you can actually skip the very first tutorial room immediately using that little cheat.
Let me bring that up. Okay, so you remember how I was talking about the bookcase from earlier in the interview? If that bookcase was still there, you would have been able to jump to a platform and walk to a door that would have skipped the entire tutorial. And the only way to do that now is to edit the speed value using the code that Whip specified, so that Harry has enough speed to make the jump.
Yeah. That's likely why that bookcase got removed then.
Fair enough.
And because the Croc Editor bakes the lighting, if that had been removed last minute without anyone rebaking the level, so it would have been a strat in place. Most of the things like the bookcases, if it's not to the cube, it will have been a strat object. So it would have been placed on the level by the designer and or the coder, and put in carefully positioned to be the right place to jump and so on. It may have been a debug one that's in there deliberately so that bit could be skipped specifically so you can test the next bit. and then removed at the last minute. But if they didn't rebake the level, the shadow would still be there from the original baked lighting.
I see. Right, that makes sense. And I was also going to ask, because you can still reach the ledge to pull yourself up, but Harry doesn't grab. I was thinking like maybe there was like an invisible wall that was added there, so as to kind of like shut that off, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of the tuning design for the levels is going around. The artists are going around with basically putting invisible walls in to stop problems like that acute angle issue, and where you shouldn't be allowed to go. So we know where Harry should be allowed to go, and we go kind of back to the early submission things, because most of the Croc Engine games would usually end up getting ported to Nintendo platforms as well. We'd have a separate team with port to Nintendo. This one I don't think they did. I think they were only contracted for PlayStation. But previous games there would be some a two-man engine team who would do a Nintendo port. And one of the tales you get told about Nintendo's submission process is they have a guy whose entire job is to take games like platform games and run around all the edges and try and fall off the world. That's all he does all day long. And there's another guy who does nothing but mash buttons constantly all day long and see if it breaks it. And we've seen games break from doing that as well, so it's something you're always wary of, this sort of thing. So part of the game design team and the level design team, as far as the artists are concerned, is going around and putting invisible collision in to smooth out walls and to make the collision clean, so that you can't basically find an edge. And of course, again, one of the things with the Croc Engine, because everything's made of cubes, if your cube model isn't exact, you're going to have a very fine seam. So if you're not careful, you can end up with gaps at edges that the collision could go through. And of course, the collision's only simple ray casting, so you've got to be very definite on slapping collision in there. Very
careful, right? Well,
it's actually interesting you bring that up, because towards the final fight, you have to, before you fight Voldemort, you have to beat some knights, and then a rock falls down and you walk to the last room. And you can actually make a jump from one end to the other, where there's a very small pixel you can grab onto and skip the entire night fight.
Yeah, that probably wasn't intentional.
You programmed that bit, so you have no excuses here.
Well, I didn't do the actual model for the level design, so yeah, I'll have to check with who did that one. Matt might actually know that one.
Fair enough. Okay, Whiff, have you got any more questions before we wrap this thing up?
1 week ago, we actually found a small discovery, and this is again related to the cheat where you input a RAM value and Harry goes really fast. Two things that we found out was that if you skip the tutorial, the free aim option stays locked indefinitely if you skip the tutorial. And another thing we found out is that when Nick, the nearly headless ghost, teaches you about Flipendo, you can actually use the cheat to go out of the cutscene, and Flipendo will stay locked throughout the entire game. Is this going back to the way the waypoint system works?
Not so much the waypoint, but more of the case of the strat code for those sequences will be, the code will be very simply, do this, do the tutorial. At the end of the tutorial, set something in the save data for this is now unlocked or available, or gives you or for instance, doing the choice for the free aim. This is actually now enabled. And if you haven't actually got to that point because you've skipped over it somehow, because that's never actually got to trigger, if it's timing based, for instance, then yeah, you'll just never trigger and it'll never happen.
Ah, I see. That makes sense. So another thing that just occurred to me is in a lot of the sort of pre-release and beta screenshots, the camera is in weird sort of positions that you wouldn't be able to get it in game. During the development of the game, did you have like a debug camera that you could position throughout the level?
There's a very high chance that some of those screenshots will have been done in the editor. Or like you say, there'll be someone to set a camera up on. If it's something on like the usual thing would be like we're all trying to work and get these levels written, and there'll be a call comes from on high above that they need screenshots for marketing, and basically the producer would take someone aside and they would go away and sort out how to get some screenshots that look okay, considering that there'd be probably big holes in the level or something, you know. So it's that tends to be typical for marketing on most games. You'll get screenshots during production will be nothing like what the game does in real life.
Is that why there's so many screenshots of the broomstick area? Because the broomstick area is one of the areas that was actually like finished and ready to be presented, and everywhere else was like still kind of crappy looking.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, basically, if that's the only room available at the time, we might have a couple of characters, and we've got the broomstick area, slap some people in it, and take some shots, basically, to set some scenes up. Because it's very, very easy in the editor to physically position things, and you could set up screenshots effectively in the editor just as their own levels almost.
And what about changing skyboxes and changing lighting? Because I noticed quite a lot of pre-release screenshots didn't have the correct skybox or the correct lighting. So how easy was that to change?
Not skyboxes would have been easy because it's a case of picking one, but it's down to which ones had been done at the time. There's a good chance that we have one skybox or a simple one initially. And then later on, the artists actually have more time scheduled to actually do those. As the levels have been developed, then they can start doing the skyboxes for them. That would definitely be one for the artists to answer. And things like lighting. Lighting was fairly primitive on that version of the editor. It sort of had a semi-baked lighting kind of thing going on. Like I said, for things like the sort of the shadow effect or whatever of the objects. So again, that was a bit more of an intensive process. So you tend to get the lighting will be done later as another art pass sort of thing. So when the level's done, the artist would go away and kind of finesse it basically.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool, man. Thanks for your time. You've answered quite a lot of questions. Whip, do you have anything else? Can we wrap this up?
Should we end on a fun note?
Yeah, sure. Let's end on a high note.
Matt posted a comment in the chat saying he put an Easter egg in where you can hear someone having a mega shit in a cubicle in the girls' bathroom.
That was it, the farting bathroom thing, yes. It's entirely possible that one snuck through, because while we were supposed to tell EA and everything under, the threat of being fired if anything got through, it's entirely possible Matt might have snuck that one through and not get fired.
So now we've got to go through the game again, play it all, and see if the mega shit has made it into the final release.
Yeah. If he's done like we did, a lot of our stuff we like this is an old trick of only do it once every 1,000 games, or at a pure random number with a very low percentage, on the basis that if you've got 1 million players and it's a 1 in a million chance, one player will get it, and one player will write into the magazines and say, such and such happened, and they'll go, oh no, that's bollocks, and then you'll get much more magazine coverage over it. I did that one with Jetstrike, and it worked. I got extra coverage just on the basis of some guy wrote into a magazine saying, hey, I was playing the game and this alien spaceship came down and crashed into my plane and apologized and gave me his spaceship to play with. And the magazine was like, you're making this up, this is rubbish. So I wrote in and said, no, actually it's true. It's a 1 in a million chance. And because that's two magazine releases worth of extra coverage. I was like, yes.
Fantastic. It's a little guerrilla marketing strategy. I like it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, are we ready to wrap this thing up with? Or do you have anything else?
Matt made another comment that you, Aaron, and Matt, you made a vampire enemy that was cut.
Yes.
He could teleport and was a bastard to fight, according to...
Yeah, he didn't make it through. That was another one which he probably got axed. I don't remember too much about him. I remember him being a complete git. I was being a bit mean on his design, but yeah, stuff like that wasn't allowed because it was cool and it was fun and everything, but it wasn't in the book.
So he got cut. That's such a shame. Such a shame. All right, is there anything else, or is that everything?
I think that about covers it. Now we just need to find a way into the girls' bathroom and see if the Easter egg is there.
Yeah, we need to find that mega shit Easter egg. It's important now. All right, well, thank you very much for your time, Aaron. It's absolutely incredible to have you on. Where can people find you nowadays? You know, what are you up to? What's the latest?
Well, like I say, most of the games I've been working on at the moment directly are on Apple Arcade, but also you'll find all our good classic games on GameClub.io, and also StrangeFlavor.com. But that's pretty out of date at the moment, so I just haven't had time to go back to doing anything sort of new there. So there's bits and pieces of our old stuff there, but I think our most up to date and playable stuff that you'll have most fun on it is on GameClub.io.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Aaron. It's been great interviewing you. You've provided so many answers. Thank you so much. Yeah. Hope you had a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it's been fun trying to remember it all.
Got to get the old memory working somehow, eh? Well, thank you very much for all
the
your
thing
answers.
is now I'm going to have everybody I worked with is now going, hang on, that's complete bollocks. You didn't do that. I did that. Or, you know, we didn't do that.
You're going to have people picking this interview apart.
God, yeah. The engine coders are going to be correcting me for weeks, I bet you.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, until that happens, it's been great having you on, Aaron. And, yeah, if you ever want to do this some point in the future, let us know. We'll be more than glad to have you on.
Cool, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, man. Cheers.
Of course. Merry Christmas, everyone. See you.
Bye. Wow, that was incredible. That was amazing. Holy smokes. You know what? I think I'm going to leap into VC on Discord. If anyone in the stream wants to join me in there, I want to have a talk about that for a second because, whoa, okay. That was a whole lot of information really, really quickly. And I think I'm going to need to go back and watch this stream again because there was so much shit being discussed there that wow. Wow, we learned a lot today, everybody. We learned a lot. And honestly, I feel kind of blessed that I got this opportunity. Thank you all for coming out and watching this, especially Sir Eekster. Thank you, Matt, for popping into the chat. I didn't expect you to show up and to give your additional comments on everything, but it was great having you in, and you really helped add to the sort of depth of the interview. Thanks, Raging Redneck. Thank you, Nanonim, Whip, of course. Thank you for hosting it with me, man. It means a lot. Plushiness, Mr. Elite. I saw Raging in here a little bit earlier. I don't know if he's dipped now. Slend was in here as well. But yeah, just a lot of really good information coming out there. A lot of really interesting stuff. And yeah, I'm glad that I did that interview because it's things like that which make this game so much more interesting when you can sit down with a developer and hear those opinions. So anyone have either of you two got an opinion on this interview? Or hang on, I'm not getting audio on my Discord. Just bear with me a moment, guys. Don't know why I'm not getting audio.
Tell me.
Okay, there we go. Now I've got audio. Yeah. My apologies.
Yeah. It's fine. You hear me?
Yep, you're here now. Okay.
Nice. So yeah, it was just super nice to have him and Matt too on the chat. Very insightful. Lots of little things, but most of the questions about inside development of the game, the crunch things, all of that was very, very cool to hear from him.
And Whip, thank you so much for hosting it with me, man. I think you really helped. I know you didn't say much, but you being there and you sort of giving me, writing out the questions and all the rest of it, I went off of that pretty much word for word, so thank you for that. Yeah. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this interview again because there was so much stuff that was said that I didn't even know that I'm just going to have to go back and be like, I'm going to have to digest it all, you know? I think I'll look at the game in a new way now because of everything. Because I feel like I have a real like understanding for this game now. Like it's not just a game that I'm playing; it's a game that I like sort of understand. So I feel differently about this game than when I played it as a kid. It's hard to describe, but
You did forget to mention one thing.
oh, I did. What did I forget?
Thanks, Whip, for setting up this whole thing in the first place.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Whip. Thank you. I owe you my life, man. You got him on the horn. You're the one who got in contact with him. You're the one who, all the glory goes to you, my friend. I just talked to the guy. You got it set up. You got the questions written. Without you, this wouldn't have happened. So really, thank you a lot, man. It means a lot. Thank you.
Well, thank you too, because I think you make a better host than I do. So I think it's good that you took the charge, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I'm just doing my bit for the community. I'm just trying to help us to understand this complicated little game that we call Harry Potter. I'm just trying to figure it out as much as the next man. So, this has been an absolutely great experience, but I think we're about ready to wrap the stream up, I think. So, yeah, everyone, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of this. And, yeah, we will have this uploaded to YouTube probably sometime tomorrow. So, I've been recording the whole time, so I should just be able to upload the VOD and go from there. And then, yeah, you'll be able to watch it on YouTube. Or you can watch it back here on Twitch. But yeah, look forward to that tomorrow. Once again, thank you, Whip. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and good night.